welcome to Stories After Midnight. Today we're going to be reading The Never-Ending Cave. This is the final story in a collection of stories called 54 Sleepless Nights, written by Tobias Wade. I really hope you enjoy it. If you've enjoyed the book so far, if you can pick yourself up a copy on Amazon, and I believe there's an Audible book as well. Links to those items will be in the description of this episode. Anyways, I hope you enjoy this story, and before we get started, a huge shout out to my patrons for helping make this episode possible. Now let's get started. I'm not afraid of the dark, I lied. Then turn off your light, my friend James said. He and his brother Jim exchanged a mischievous grin. First James, then Jim, the lights on their phones snuffing out. Mine was the only light left, its pale radiance woefully insufficient to illuminate the stony cavern around us. I don't know why I insisted on going with them when they told me about the cave. Growing up as an only child, I never had the sense that I was missing something until I met Jim and James, two sides of the same coin. Before them, I'd never imagined two people could be so perfectly in sync before. They hardly ever spoke to each other directly, but a shared glance was enough for them to communicate, as though they read each other's thoughts. Jim and James were always telling stories about the great adventures they had. The two spinning the narrative together so fluidly, it was as though they were characters reading from a script. Sometimes the things they said sounded too fantastical to be true, like the one about going over a waterfall together. But it was just hard to believe that one can make up a story like that, while the other joined in to elaborate the lie so seamlessly. I guess I followed them out of jealousy, just wanting to fit in and feel that kind of brotherhood. You said you wanted to experience the caves, James prodded impatiently. I'm here, aren't I? I asked defensively. Not fully, Jim countered. As long as you rely on the light, you're just passively reliving the same sensation you do every day. The cave is experienced through a different kind of sensation, but you'll never feel it as long as you're letting your eyes distract you. Who you going to believe, us or your lying eyes? James agreed eagerly. Trust us, it'll be like nothing you ever imagined. Okay, but you better not be trying to pull something funny on me, I grumbled, switching my flashlight off. I felt what they were talking about the instant the darkness engulfed us. The stone above our heads had just been a ceiling before, like any other room I'd been in. I couldn't sense the enormity of the mountain over my head until the light was off or hear the thunderous stillness of this secret place. I didn't like the darkness itself, but there was something magical about everything it concealed. The quiet seemed to grow louder with every passing moment, until I could hear my own blood in my veins. Then somewhere deeper into the cave I heard the distant echo of voices. My blood grew louder, and I immediately fumbled for my flashlight again. Keep it off, Jim chided. You wanted an adventure, didn't you? James added, an infuriating taunt in his voice. I could read the subtext there. He was saying that he and his brother were brave enough, and that if I wanted to go along with them, I had to prove myself too. The fact that I was starting to read them so well made me feel like I really did belong here too, and that gave me enough courage to endure the echoes in the dark. Who do you think is down there? I asked in a tentative whisper. I could hear the footsteps as the brothers began moving toward the voices, and I followed with one hand tracing along the wall. Pirates, James said without hesitation. Murderers, James said, with almost the same breath. They were still testing me, teasing me. Fine then. I could play along. Oh, good, I said. I was starting to feel out of place being the only murderer here. I ran into the back of one of them who had stopped suddenly ahead of me. I couldn't tell who it was until James said, I wanted the place to ourselves. Let's come back another time when there isn't anyone else here. He turned abruptly and pushed past me to head back toward the entrance. I automatically started to turn as well, but Jim gripped me by the arm to lead me deeper to the voices. Don't you hate it when James makes you feel like a coward? Let's keep going, and then we can get him back by reminding him how he ran away. I'm not running, James complained from somewhere in the darkness. The tourists ruin the whole experience. I'll just be at the entrance, waiting for you to figure that out too. I continued to follow Jim deeper into the cave, the voices getting louder all the while. At first I thought it had been a conversation, but now that the words were becoming clearer, it seemed that there was only one person there, apparently complaining about the darkness to himself. We continued creeping along until it seemed like the other person was right beside us in the dark, and then I couldn't take the suspense anymore. I turned on my flashlight, and the beam was blinding after having adjusting without it. The person we discovered was shielding their face with hands covered in dirt and bloody scratches, as though he'd been digging. "Who goes there?" I called triumphantly, as though I owned the place. I was the one who was shocked by what the light revealed, though. James was standing there at the far end of the tunnel, grinning sinisterly into the flashlight. I had distinctly heard his voice behind us as he went back toward the entrance, and I can't imagine how he got past us and deeper down the tunnel without being noticed. I sensed that I couldn't let my surprise show without him winning, though, and I did my best to keep a straight face. "There you are. We've been looking everywhere for you," Jim said, moving to embrace his brother. "How long have you been down here?" "Hours. Maybe a day," James croaked, his voice dry and cracked. I knew they must be playing a trick on me somehow, but I couldn't figure out how, and it was making me uneasy. "Okay, I give. How did you do it?" I asked. "You couldn't have just slipped around us in the dark because we were following a voice down here." "You wait here. I'm going to grab some water from my pack and be right back," Jim said, hurrying off the way we came toward the cave entrance. Along with James, there was no denying it really did look like he'd been down here for a long time. His face was pale and weary, his clothes ragged and dirty, and those cuts on his hands looked real. He couldn't have actually cut himself just to play a joke on me, could he? "There are 2 entrances, aren't there?" I said. "You went out and circled back through the other one. This whole place is a loop." "Yeah, that must be it," James said with a sly smirk. "Come on, let's keep going and see if we can meet up with Jim." Still insisted on playing along and not letting them make a fool of me, I agreed and followed him deeper into the tunnel. The path was starting to get tighter, and we had to stoop so low we were almost on our hands and knees. James didn't make any more requests about me turning off my light, though, so that was good enough for me. I tried not to think about how we kept climbing downward, and that if this really was a loop, then we would have to come back up at some point. There were voices again, deeper still into the earth, defiantly 2 of them this time, apparently having a heated argument with each other. I could still see James crawling ahead of me, but I couldn't shake how much the voices sounded like him and his brother. "See, I told you he'd find us," Jim's voice said. I stopped cold in my tracks. Once James got out of the way, I could see the cave widening out ahead of us. Jim and James were both standing there facing me, both looking clean and rested. The other ragged person I thought was James was nowhere to be seen. "That's what you get for trying to chicken out and turn around," James jeered. "That's not right, I didn't." "Heard the voices and ran," Jim agreed calmly. "No use denying it." "But you were the voices. They were coming from you," I protested, feeling myself grow quite flustered. It wasn't fair for them to think I was afraid when I had kept going, and if Jim and James were both here, then why did I still hear the voice echoing from deeper in the earth? Laughing, taunting, reverberating from the walls, its pressure weighing down on me as surely as the mountain of the earth above my head. "You can either tell me what's going on, or I'm going back," I demanded. The voice deeper down the tunnel shifted subtly, the laughter turning to tears, then wails of despair. "Come on, someone needs our help down there," Jim said, hurrying across the stone chamber to where the path narrowed again. James was right behind him, turning on his phone light as he dropped to his knees. "I'm not going," I said desperately. I felt like I was going to regret staying here alone, but listening to that wailing voice, I knew I couldn't go on. Because I was listening to the sound of my own voice deeper in the tunnel, strange and echoed as it was. They didn't stop to argue or convince me, and before I could rethink my decision, I suddenly found myself alone. I stood frozen in fear as I listened to what I was sure was my own sobbing. I couldn't stay in this place. But at the same time, I was afraid to turn back and become even more lost in this labyrinth. Listening to the sound of that crying was too much to bear, though, and it wasn't long before I turned around and started climbing back the way I'd come. "This way! He's in here!" I shuddered at Jim's voice, and flinched as the bright light emerged around the corner to shine on my face. Not the way they'd gone, though. There was no mistaking it. Jim and James had emerged from the path I thought led toward the entrance. I didn't let them speak, knowing it would only confuse me more. I pushed past them and ran, resolving not to stop, no matter what I heard or saw, until I got above ground again. "Where are you going?" Jim shouted after me. "I thought you were trying to get out." "Out's the other way, mate," James called. "You're going deeper." They were lying. They had to be lying. How could they have come from deeper underground to find me? I hadn't gone far before I stopped suddenly, though, realizing I should be climbing an elevation after going down the whole way here. Turning in both directions, though, the path descended either way, as though I was on top of some subterranean mountain. The cave was still again, and my blood was pounding louder than ever. I felt the pressure building and building until I couldn't help but scream, immediately slapping my hands over my mouth when I heard the sound that emerged, that wail escaping my lips. It was exactly the sound that had lured Jim and James away from me just a moment before. It really had been me who had been crying down there, not deeper in the cave, but farther ahead in time. I hated the sobs that heaved from my body, hating them all the more for hearing them a second time. Did that mean that the ragged and dirty James was also a future version of himself, one that would become trapped down here as well? I resolved then not to go back for them. No matter what happened, I would keep going straight, and I wouldn't stop. I would keep going down, even as my flashlight flickered and dimmed, even as the voices cried and jeered at me from the darkness. Even as I passed Jim and James over and over again, sometimes apart, sometimes together, sometimes in health, other times crawling along bloody stones with the last of their strength. I would keep going, but not stop or speak until I was out. And if I never make it out, then let this record on my phone help whoever finds me make sense of the madness of this wretched place. Thank you for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, let me know. And, I guess we could leave a note for the author too, right? Now, this is the last story, so if you've been listening to all of these 54 Sleepless Nights stories, let me know your thoughts on the book. And, hey, if you'd like to pick yourself up a copy, well, links, like I said before, there'll be links in the description for that. I also, again, want to give a huge shout out to my patrons for helping support my pizza and chicken shawarma poutine addiction. I appreciate you guys for letting me eat until my heart's content once a week on Fridays. It really helps make the week feel worth it at the end, and it's all because of you. So if you'd like to support the channel and make sure that I am able to become obese off of chicken shawarma poutine with mild spice, then join the Patreon, where there is early access to videos and a little bit of a podcast I've been trying to do over there. And well, with all that said, there's also a Discord that you can join if you'd like to, where we all kind of hang out, come and go as you please. And I think that's about it. I thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed yourself, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care now. Bye-bye then.